Good morning, Electric Culture of Safety Line Team. Welcome again to episode 54. 54 with Mr. James McGowan. And he's, what is it, associate?
Associate consultant.
Associate consultant with ISPC. Again, ISPC, we thank you all for contributing about 8 speakers, flying them out, driving them out to South Carolina to our live line training center here in South Carolina. It's a cloudy morning. We had a little rain this morning, kind of cool September 2024. And real excited with James coming on board. The topic he's going to share is unique, new, just like everybody coming there, sharing from his heart. Mr. James, talking with you last night over some dinner, breaking some bread, and your passion and your experience started in 1980 in the line industry, and you were bringing it up, some topics and your experience and everything that you've seen. And what's interesting is how your life has been molded and shaped to where you're at today, and you can see the process. Tell us a little bit about 1980. What got you in 1980? What sunk you in, man?
Well, prior to starting line work, I was a machinist in a factory in Kentucky, and economy kind of took a downturn back then, and so I found myself looking for work, needed a job, and I had a friend that had been in power line construction for a few years. He happened to be in town, and he said, "Hey, I know where there's a job out in Colorado where we can go to work. I need a ride. I've got the job. You have a ride. Are you interested in going?" So we headed toward Colorado to go to work for a line company. We ran out of money in Kansas, and he knew a friend that was working for a company down in southern Kansas, and so we called him up and said, "What's the chances? We need some money to at least get a drag fund to go on out into Colorado." And he said, "Interesting." This was like a Saturday. He said, "The Western Division manager came in yesterday and fired the entire job."
Dang.
The entire job was behind, so he had them all lined up in the parking lot, and he said, "From you to you is gone. Get your stuff and go." And so Monday morning, they're rebuilding the entire job, and we just happened to show up on Saturday. Wow. So it was a pretty convenient time, and it was an interesting time. It was a chance to learn a whole new trade, and I just fell in love with it and got into it, and then just stayed with it and said, I'm okay at doing this. I'm an okay line builder. I'm an okay lineman. I'm an okay operator, but I'm a little bit better at talking and getting the message across. And so I refined that and got into that aspect. I went to a line school and met a gentleman that said, "Hey, you're good at what you're doing, but you could be better. We could use you in apprenticeship training and things like that." So in 1987, 88, I started training apprentices.
Nice.
And then that brought me into this. That brought me up to this point now. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So James's background is very diverse throughout the United States. In fact, we kind of crossed paths a few times over the years, and we didn't even realize it. Small world. And
it is a small world.
Yeah. And just real excited. Again, 14,000 plus members now, Electric Culture of Safety, 2.5 years now into it. And you'll see in the recording, you'll see all the folks that are partnered up with their logo, all the companies that are supporting what we're doing throughout the United States and even Canada, which is interesting enough. How we're forming basically a North American wide line team. So pay attention, take some notes. You guys can ask questions to Mr. James and type them out if you have any questions, and we'll come to your questions. And thank you for being here, and enjoy Mr. James. Thank you, brother.
Thank you, sir.
James,
appreciate you.
Bet.
Thanks for hosting me. Thanks for having me. What I'm going to talk to you about today is I title this presentation, "What Does Right Look Like?" Not my original thought. I heard this from someone a long time ago when we were putting together a safety improvement process. And what drove this process is the company I was working for, they had a few crane accidents. And well, not a few, they had more than their share. And so they got with the insurance company, the consultants, and this gentleman came in and he says, well, let's see if we can try to make your crane operations a little better. He said, when you see a crane set up properly, you as a safety observer, when you see it set up properly, do you know what that looks like? And I said, yeah, I can look at a crane that's set up correctly and pretty much right off the bat know it's set up level, it's set up correctly, the outriggers are fully extended, whatever. I can look at it and say, yeah, and he says, well, if you can characterize that, if you can put that in the form of positive statements, he said, once you have that, then you can measure it. And once you can measure it, then you can manage it. It becomes a manageable process instead of just by luck. And he says, and what I found out is defining what right looks like can be difficult. And so not to give the whole thing away, let me go ahead and get into it now and tell you where this comes from. So in the context of work, when we're out doing our jobs, you ask yourselves, well, what is it we're responsible for? And I know for the most part, this is what it feels like. We carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. We're responsible for everything, especially if it goes south. Then you find out just the things you were responsible for, you didn't even realize you were responsible for because it went south. So this is the perception that we carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. In my opinion, this is the reality. And the reality as managers of companies, as people that are designed or our jobs are to manage things at companies, we need to manage production, we need to manage quality, and we need to manage safety. And all of that comes down to the reality of our company's health. And I call that the golden triangle. Now, not my idea, that's what somebody else had called it too, but I like that. I like that characterization. So when it comes to quality, when it comes to productivity, when it comes to safety, some of those things are fairly easy to define. As far as productivity, that's a fairly easy definition. You're either doing it or you're not. You're either on schedule or you're not. You got done in time or you didn't. That's pretty simple. And not to take away from the complexity of it, but understanding being productive is fairly simple. You've got a schedule, you've got a production schedule, you're either on time or you're not. You got all your poles hauled by the date, you got all your wires strung by the date, whatever it is. You got all your conduit in the ground by the date. That's productivity, it's measurable. Quality, your customer will let you know really quickly if you're doing a quality job. They'll clearly define quality for you. Then you have your own internal quality standards as well. So that's pretty much understood. But when it comes to safety, one of the things I learned over the years as I got into safety management is we want people to be safe. We expect them to be safe. We train them to be safe. We give them the tools. We spend millions of dollars to help them to be safe. But have we clearly defined what it is that we want them to do? What does it mean to be safe? And I'd ask that question many times. And generally the answer I get, I'll talk to you about that in a second, but generally the answer I get is, yeah, we're safe because nobody's getting hurt. And I just don't know if that's a good measurement of being safe. It's a good indicator that you may be being safe, but it could also be a good indicator if you're just being lucky. You just had some luck, because you know as well as I do, and I'm speaking to the choir here, you know as well as I do that everybody that's listening to me today and it's going to listen to me, you've done things that put you unnecessarily at risk and nothing happened. No, there was no down, it didn't happen. The down thing that could have happened didn't happen. So because nothing happened, because you didn't get hurt, because you didn't get the vehicle tore up, the equipment turned over, whatever, well, I was safe because nothing got tore up. No, you were lucky. Because if you keep following that tact, if you keep following that train of thought, if you keep following that behavior, eventually it's going to generate a loss. History proves itself. We know it does. And so let me move on here. Dan Peterson said, let's talk about some roles. And Dan Peterson was one of my heroes. I just likes the way he thinks, like the way he thinks about things. He said the role of the executive is to visibly demonstrate the value of safety. And now I underline the word value for a reason, and I'll get back to that in a second. But the key thing there, and the reason it's italicized, to visibly demonstrate, not lip service. Oh, I'm on board, I'm totally on board, and you never see them out there. You never see them. They're just not involved. They're just on the out. They have to visibly demonstrate their value. Now let's go to the other side of the coin. What's the role of the frontline worker? The role of the frontline worker is to complete assigned tasks and meeting deadlines. It's that simple. There's things that we want them to do, and so we want them to complete those assigned tasks and meeting the deadlines. What we always have to remember, and we can't lose track of this is not mine, this comes from Stephen Covey. He says the front line creates the bottom line. And so if we're not focusing on the front line, if we're not focusing on the front line and how to make their jobs easier and more concise and better understood, then we're losing track of the bottom line. And if we lose track of the bottom line, I don't care how safe we are. If we're not productive, we're just going to be a safe out of business company. I'm afraid that's what it boils down to. Dan Peterson also said, to have an excellent organization, he defined 6 criteria to have an excellent organization. One of them we've already talked about, the one at the very top. He says you've got to have visible upper management support. They're out there, they're in the trenches with you, okay? You got to have active middle management involvement. They're there. They're toting the load with you. You got to have measured supervisory performance. That is kind of the key to this whole conversation. You can't measure performance unless the measurement criteria has been clearly defined. Otherwise, what are you measuring? Okay, you got to have a high level of employee involvement. This is key to an excellent organization. The reason you have to have a high level of employee involvement, in my opinion, nobody out there working for you knows the hazards of doing their job every day better than the people that are doing it. They know how to do it. They know how to do it without tearing things up. They know how to do it without getting people hurt. They know what it takes. So if I'm trying to improve any system, I need to go to those folks and say, help me understand how we need to do this. How do we need to do this so we can accomplish these goals, so we can focus on that bottom line, we can get you home to your families, and we can be a profitable company. So that's why we have to have that high level of employee involvement. I've talked to companies during training programs, I've asked them, do you have a new employee orientation program? And almost everybody does. And I'll ask them, what did you build that program based off of? Well, they've got this list of things they want to cover. Have you ever gone to your employees and said, what is it that I should talk to new employees about when I bring them on and give them to you so they're more equipped once you get them? What is it you want me to tell them before I send them to you? Okay, that way we're all on the same page. Your processes have to be flexible. The rules you have to follow in South Dakota may not be the same rules you have to follow in Massachusetts. You've got your underlying rules, but you've got so many unique intricacies with each one of those areas that you have to have a little bit of flexibility in the process. For example, I may have a safety rule that says you have to follow the posted speed limit. In my safety rule, you have to follow the posted speed limit. You know as well as I do, if you drive at all, there are times that if you actually follow the posted speed limit, you're putting yourself and other drivers at risk because nobody else is. And so if your rule says, if your rule is hard and fast, you will follow the posted speed limit or we will sanction you. Well, you're going to be sanctioning a lot of people, including the person that most likely wrote the rule. However, if you say you run the posted speed limit or you go with the flow of traffic, whichever is safer, now you're putting it in the person's hands that are on the front line. They're the ones that's facing that. And so if they follow the speed limit to maintain their safety rules and they put themselves and everybody else at risk, we didn't accomplish anything. But you know as well as I that sometimes it is safer to go with the flow of traffic. And so you got to have some flexibility in there. And the last thing, it must be positively perceived. When you go ask your workers, do you honestly believe our safety process is tailored toward making your life better and safer and things like that? Now, I just think this is a bunch of junk you guys put together and you have no idea what it is we're dealing with out here. And so yeah, we'll follow the rules while you're watching, but as soon as you go away, we're going to do it our way. So that is not a positive perception, and what that's going to generate is that's going to generate a loss eventually. But when the folks understand, the folks that you're trying to deal with, when they understand, they're doing this to help me. And so if I follow along with this, this makes my life better, their life better, it keeps the ball rolling, keeps business going, keeps the paychecks coming. I don't see the downside. So it's got to be positively perceived. That was the 6 criteria that Dan talked about. Now I want to talk a little bit, and I underlined this earlier, and I said I was going to get to it a little bit. Let's talk about the value of safety. Little exercise. If you're like me, you most likely do not need an alarm clock to wake up in the morning. I have my own internal one, and usually it goes off about an hour earlier than I want it to. But let's just say the alarm goes off 7 o'clock in the morning, and a lot of you guys are saying my day's half done by 7 o'clock. The alarm goes off 7 o'clock in the morning. I reach over, I turn the alarm off. I get up, I've got my thing, my little deal I go through before I go to work. Before I actually grab the door handle to leave to go to work, I've got this process I follow. And some of the things that I'm going to do, and this is not an all-encompassing list, this is just some generalized things. I'm going to get up, I'm going to brush my teeth. I may exercise, may not, may spend some time with the kids if I have them or not. May watch the news, check some emails, look at the paper, eat a little bit, get dressed, take a shower. If I need to, I'm going to shave. Okay, those are all things that I'm going to do before I actually leave to go to work. Now, let's throw a little bit of a little catch in here. I just woke up a little bit late. It's not the end of the world. I can still get to work on time, but I'm going to have to push it a little bit. And I value getting to work on time, and my boss values me getting to work on time, because he says if you can't get to work on time, the guy takes your place will. Okay, so it's important to me. I'm tied to getting to work on time. 1, because of my own ethics, and 2, because I want to keep my job rolling. So I'm thinking, hell, this is the list that I've got. I'm not going to be able to do all these things. I just woke up a little late. So what can I take off the list to make sure I can still get to work on time? So most likely I'm going to start whittling away at some of these things. And as I start whittling away with them, what I'm going to come down to is I'm going to come down to basically this. I don't care how late I am. I don't care what, I am not going to work naked, because that's just going to be an end result. I'm going to lose the job anyway. Okay, so I am going to get dressed. I may skip all this other stuff. I may go out the door looking like I just slept underneath an overpass somewhere, but I'm going to get to work on time. All right, so I'm going to get dressed. The items I removed from my list were priorities. Those are priorities. The item that's still left on my list is a value. I don't care how late I am. I'm getting dressed. I'm getting dressed. May not tuck my shirt in, may not tie my shoes, may not come, but I'm getting dressed to go to work. I'll take care of all this other stuff later. So the lesson here to be learned is priorities change. They're designed to change. That's what priorities do. The priority today may not have been the priority yesterday or the priority tomorrow. Priorities change. Values are much more consistent. This is why safety needs to be a value in your organization, not a priority. It needs to be a value. It needs to be, I don't care how far behind we are. I don't care who's hollering. I don't care I am going to do it the safest, most low risk way I can do it, or I'm not going to do it. Because the end result, if I get lucky, I get lucky. But if I don't and it goes south, the price I'm going to have to pay, or somebody else may have to pay, or both of us, just isn't worth it. It's just not worth it. So safety has to be a value, because values are much more consistent. So then the question comes up, so why does it have to be this way? Well, I'm going to kind of go off into a little tangent here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about systems. And another one of my favorite persons is Edward Deming. And Edwards Deming said, every system, among other things, he said, every system is perfectly designed to give us the results that it does. So you ask yourself, Are we getting the productivity, the quality, the safety results that we want out of our system? If the answer is no, look to the system. The system is generating you the results you're getting because the system has that designed into it. So if we have a systemic problem, the only way we can fix a systemic problem is to take a systemic approach, a systems approach to fixing that. You can't just throw a safety stand down or a meeting or a training class out there and say that's going to fix it all. That's going to fix it all, because that's not the problem. You've got to look at what the system is doing. So let me move forward. And the reason I use the analogy of a system, it says a system is a group of interacting or interrelating elements that act according to the set of rules and form a unified whole. And the reason I use the picture of the chair. This chair is a seating system. It's a system that's designed to support me when I sit in it. And all the parts of this system have to work for it to function the way it's designed. Now, you could have one leg longer or shorter on the chair. It'll wobble when you sit in it. It'll still support you, but you're not comfortable with it. You go into a restaurant and sit down at the table and the table wobbles. I've seen people stick napkins under it, so that bugs me. And that bugs a lot of folks because it's unstable. The system has become unstable. It still works, but it's not comfortable. We don't like those uncomfortable systems, okay? So we work toward creating stability in the system. Now, if you look at these three things, and I've talked about this a lot, this is a system. You have a safety management system in your companies. You have a system in place to manage safety in your companies. You have a productivity and a quality management system in your companies. Now, since this conversation is touted towards safety, if you're not getting the safety results that you're desiring, if you're not getting the desired outcome out of your safety system, look at the system. Look at the system. You can say, well, it's the people. Well, one of the things you learn from human performance is people are going to make mistakes. People are going to make mistakes. So if you're going to try to have a mistake-proof environment, you're going to have to stop using people. It's just that simple. If you're going to use people, people are going to make mistakes. So don't try to fix the people. Fix the system. And I learned this from another gentleman that I'd listened to, and it'll sound familiar to you when you hear it. He said, we need to design the system to where if a person makes a mistake, if they fail, if they make a mistake, the system will let them do that safely. A perfect example of that, I think a perfect example, is one of the reasons that we have rear-end collisions. We follow too close. We follow too close. Now, most of the time, even if you know you're following too close, if you're following too close, you're making a mistake. You're mistakenly putting yourself at risk by following too close. So I could say, well, the way I need to fix this problem of all these rear-end collisions I'm having is you folks just need to stop following too close. That's a people fix. Well, first of all, they're making mistakes. And if you're going to try to get people not to make mistakes, you can forget that. People are going to make mistakes. What the automakers did is they designed autonomous braking. They designed proximity detectors. They put these things into the system to either slow the vehicle down before it gets too close, or at least it warns you before you get too close. That's a systems fix. They're trying to fix the problem. So if I happen to be following too close by mistake, the person in front of me comes down on their brakes too hard, and the system keeps me from hitting them. I failed by following too close, but the system bailed me out by allowing me to fail safely. That's one aspect the way it works. Now, none of this is foolproof naturally, because you are dealing with people, and people will surprise you. It's just that simple. It's amazing. One of my best friends, Kelly Sparrow, told me one time, he says, what I love about linemen is how creative they are, but what scares me to death about linemen is how creative they are. All right, that's every industry. That's every industry. You put any craftsman out there, any craftsperson out there, They'll figure out a way to get it done. They'll figure it out. So let's talk about this. Now, let's talk about a system that's designed this way. That productivity is huge in our system. It's a huge focus. Quality and safety, a little less. And I'm not picking on any company in particular, but there are companies that work like this. That's not a sustainable system. You will not, if you don't have safety and quality, you won't have productivity, because you're going to have to slow down to do the accident investigations and the rework. All that costs money, so it's going to slow you down. So if I do the inverse of that, and I just totally elevate safety and quality into the system and diminish productivity, the results will be the same. If you're not producing, you can have safety and quality all day long, but if you're not producing a product and selling that product, that's not a sustainable system either. A sustainable system is when you look at production, quality, and safety, and you focus your efforts toward keeping all that in harmony and in balance. You keep it all in harmony and balance. That way you have a stable system. And if you look at this, I use a chair and a stool. And the reason I do that, if you think about what our systems support, when in the greater context, the system I'm talking about is our companies, the people that provide our paychecks, the people that we work for. I want that system to be stable. If that system is somewhat unstable, then my future employment and my future gains may be uncertain. I don't like that. I got bills to pay. I got people that are expecting things out of me. So if I can dedicate my efforts toward keeping this system stable, because really what's on top of the chair or what's on top of the stool is us. We're what's sitting there. That system is supporting us to one degree or another by providing us employment and providing us compensation. So if I'm interested in keeping that going, I want to make that system stable. I want to make it as stable as possible. Now, I also like, because I use the chair with 4 legs, but I use the stool with 3, the 4th leg in the system, I'm not talking about it here, but the 4th leg in the system is you got production, you got quality, you got safety, and you got people. And you say, well, production, quality, and safety, that encompasses, well, no. There's things that you have to do to take care of your people that may not have anything to do with this. Guy needs a little time off to take care of some personal business. Guy or gal, you cover them for it. They have this come up, they have that come up. You cover them for it. Okay, you take care of your people, because remember, the front line creates the bottom line. You've got to take care of your people, so that helps take care of that sustainability. That is a stable and sustainable system. So let's talk about this. Safety, huge. When I started in 1980, you were lucky to get a hard hat when you went to work. Safety, I remember the first safety guy that ever came out to the job, and I laughed. I said, what's a safety guy? Didn't even know there was such a thing. Never heard it. It was just, you just went out and you did your jobs. And if you got hurt, well, you probably wasn't doing it right. All right, and that's how you learned your lessons. And if you live through it, you learn not to do it again, or you just probably wasn't cut out for that business. But you learned. So if we're going to expect people to be safe and work safely, then we need to define what it is that we want them to do. What is it that I want? So in essence, we're defining what right looks like. Now, what I've learned over the years is we are experts at defining what wrong looks like. We can walk out on a job site and say, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. It just jumps out at you, jumps out at you. And we bring that, we elevate that, and we try to correct that. Think about the mindset that would have put you in if I'm going to go out and visit crews today, and my purpose is to go out and see how many good things I can see being done. I'm going to go out and try to record how many times I can actually catch somebody doing it right. And every time I catch somebody doing it right, I'm going to thank them for it. I'm going to thank them for it. Now, once you know your people, you know what kind of thanks they like. They may want a shake on the hand, they may want a pat on the back, they may not want any of that. They may want a little of this, a little of that, an incentive, whatever. Motivate your people, but when you go out and try to catch them doing it right, then they realize you're on their side, you're not just a cop out to bust them. Okay, and no disreflection on cops. But we've got to go away from a police state type safety management to where we're coaching people into doing what we want them to do. So we have to define that up front. I can't expect somebody to do what I want them to do if I haven't clearly defined that. And so one of the first questions we want to ask is, why do people take unnecessary risk? In Australia, they call it MUEs. Unnecessary risk will generate what's called an MUE. It's called a material unwanted event. And I never understood the word material in that definition, and so I talked to some Australians, and they said, okay, this is it. You've got some unwanted events like hurt feelings and bad attitudes and things like that. Those are unwanted events. He said, but when you turn a crane over, when you destroy a piece of equipment, when you lose a contract because of poor performance, all that costs you money. That's going to hit you in your pocket. It's going to hit the company at the bottom line. That's a material loss. So they talk about, how do we avoid material unwanted events? First, you need to understand, why are we doing these things? Well, it all boils down to, we may have a mismatch. We may have the wrong person in the job. They may not be matched for the job. They're great people, it's a great job, but they're not matched for each other. The next one, it could be because of habits. Because we've all got these habits. We've got habits, and some of them are bad habits. And some of the bad habits have never generated losses for us or bad consequences. And so we kind of ignore them. We don't pay a whole lot of attention to them because we know they're wrong, they just haven't generated major losses or anything we can't absorb, so we don't really worry about it too much. We just may be unaware that we're putting ourselves at risk or other people at risk. We just maybe a lack of understanding of what we're doing. It could be that my training was inadequate, that it didn't exist, okay, or it didn't address the situation that I'm trying to face. It may have been training about this, but I'm doing this. Yeah, that kind of applies, but it doesn't. So really, I can't fall back, because training is a tool. When you're a craftsperson, or even an executive, you have a toolbox. Some of them are in your head, some of them you carry, or both. You have this list of tools that you rely on to do your job. Training is one of those tools. And so if you need a crescent wrench and you pull out a screwdriver, you might be able to get the nut loose, but it's not going to work really well. You had a great screwdriver, but what you needed was a crescent wrench. So if the training does not adequately address the need, they're not going to be able to use it. They're not going to be able to go in and pull that tool out of that toolbox and use it, because it's not applicable. Motivation. Sometimes people just aren't motivated to do it. They're tired, they're under pressure, they're aggravated. Who knows? Motivation is an amazing thing if you can learn how to use it and understand it, but it's tough. It's tough. Another one is risk tolerance. Some folks just have a higher tolerance to risk. You take your folks that jump out of airplanes. All right, I'd love to jump out of an airplane. I just don't think I could ever do it. I just don't think if I got to the door and it was time to step out at 1,500 feet or whatever, I just don't think I could do it. I just don't think my tolerance to risk would allow me to do that. Other folks, ooh, right out, right out. So their risk tolerance is a little different. And then lastly, lack of buy-in. To me, this is critical. And I like to use analogies. If I walked onto a car lot, let's say I'm interested in buying a new vehicle, and I walk onto the local car dealer, and the salesman comes out, which you know that doesn't happen anymore, but the salesman comes out and says, can I help you? Yeah, I'm interested in buying that new pickup truck there. Can you tell me a little bit about it? And the salesman says, nope, I ain't gonna tell you a darn thing about it. Well, why not? Because you're gonna buy it. I'll see you inside. Come on in when you're ready to write the check. I haven't got time to fool with you. Come on in and buy this truck. Well, I'm gonna stand there and think about this and say, I don't know. I don't know. This guy isn't doing a very good job convincing me why it would benefit me to buy this truck. So I'm really just not bought in here. I love the truck. It's the perfect color. It's got all the stuff I want. But because of the way the guy kind of treated me, he didn't really motivate me to go into this. So I'm not really bought into this. It's the same thing. I come out and I see my operator not wearing a seatbelt in the backhoe. You need to put your seatbelt on. Well, why? Because it's the rules. I'm pretty sure he knows it's the rules. He or she. I'm pretty sure the operator already knows it's the rules. They're not wearing their seatbelt because they don't know the rules. They're not wearing their seatbelt because they're not bought in to how it benefits them to do that. I've talked to a lot of gas distribution guys, on and off the back hose 100 times a day. And the guy tells me, he says, man, if I have to put this thing on and off every time I get on and off this machine, he said, I'm gonna be buckling and unbuckling this thing 100 times a day. He says, it's aggravating, it's been laying in the floor of the machine, it's covered with grease and oil, it's nasty, and it slows me down, and it makes my day more difficult. Yeah, I know, but it's the rules. I'm sorry, he's not bought in. He or she's not bought in. But when I go to him and I say, hey, listen, I realize everything you're saying is true. Everything you're saying is true. It is aggravating. I will try to get these things cleaned up. We need to work on that. But it is aggravating and it does slow you down. However, there's a real good chance that this backhoe could end up on its side. That happens. We see it happen all the time. If you're not wearing a seatbelt when that happens, there's also a real good chance you're going to get thrown out of that. And there's also a real good chance that you're going to end up trapped under the roll cage. All right, so now think about it. It's a real pain in the butt to do this on and off, on and off, on and off. But if you get trapped under the roll cage and you're taken out, think about the pain in the butt it's going to be for those that depend on you, like your family, like your son, or your daughter, or your wife, or your mom, or your dad, or the people that's dependent on you to go out there and do this and get home, right? That's where you look at it. Don't do it because the rule says so. Do it because it benefits you. And by benefiting you, by helping keep you going, keep your job safer, keep you more productive. That way you helps you do what the reason you're working. You're most likely working to help to have things and help provide for people. If you take an unnecessary risk at work and you're taken out, sad to say, if you're taken out, your problems here are over. They're over. The people that are depending on you, theirs are just starting. Theirs are just starting. And I realize it's aggravating putting this on and off, but come on. Aren't they worth it? Aren't they worth that little bit of extra effort to do this? When you approach an employee or a worker like this, or anybody, family member, when you approach them with, say, hey, listen, I know this is aggravating. I know this is going to cause you stress and strain and extra aggravation and things like that. But this is what it can generate if we don't do it. I think it's worth it. So take that little extra time and do that. So that lack of buy-in, they really don't understand how it benefits them to do it because forever they haven't done it and it hadn't been a problem. So now you're trying to get them to change their behavior and they really don't understand, how does this benefit me, because I've been doing just fine. And it's the old saying, if it's not broke, don't fix it. It is broke. And if you don't fix it, it's going to break worse and it's going to break other things. So we got to stay on top of that. So what I want to talk to you about a little bit is what's called the MARS model. And I learned this when I was studying organizational behavior. And this is kind of an understanding. None of this is written in stone, like this is absolutely why it is the way it is. But helping to understand why things happen the way they do may help you craft corrective actions or improvement strategies. So one of the things I learned about was the MARS model. And it says, okay, when people come into your organization, when you bring people into your organization, this is what they bring with them. They bring their values, their personalities, their perceptions, their emotions and attitudes, and stress. Let me take a little shortcut here on attitudes. I love to have fun with this one. I'll bet anybody that's listening to me or going to listen to me, if I ask the question, do you have people out there that have bad safety attitudes? I would be willing to bet that I would get some affirmatives on that. Okay, so if a person has a bad safety attitude, does that put them or others at risk? I think it does. I think it does. So what I would like to focus on is if I've identified a person that I think has a bad safety attitude, then my question would be, how do I change their attitude? How do I change their attitude to have a better safety attitude? Bad news, folks, you can't. You cannot change somebody's attitude. You can't. You can influence it, but you can't change it. They're the ones that if I'm going to change my attitude, I'm going to change it. You're not going to change it. You may influence me. You may show me why I should do this. You may show me the benefit of it or why I should do it, but I'm going to make the ultimate decision whether to change or not. So stop focusing on trying to change people's attitudes. Focus on why they should change them and help them understand, well, if you keep going down this road, this is where you're heading. Because if you always go where you're always going, you're going to get where you're going. I mean, it's that simple. If you stay on track, you're going to get where you're going. Even though if it's a bad place, you're going to get where you're going. And then lastly, they bring stress into the organization. Now, this is our organization. Once they come to us, we need to provide this. We need to motivate them. Motivate them through pay, motivate them through gainful employment, motivate them through training, motivate them through long-term employment, things that we need to motivate them. I am glad you're here. Let me tell you what I want you to do for me, and let me tell you what I'm going to do for you as a company. I'm going to motivate them. Now, I've got to give them the ability to do what I'm asking them to do. If I bring people in off the street and I want them to be a lineman or an operator or any trade, I'm going to have to train them, and I'm going to have to provide them the resources and support to do that. So I'm going to have to give them the ability to do that. Now lastly, the bottom one, role perception. Role perception is where I'm going to clearly explain what it is I'm hiring you to do and what I want you to do. This is your role in the organization. This is what I want you to do. This is what I'm paying you to do. So let me go back to my car lot deal. Huge car lot in town where I live. They're real successful. I decide I want to be a car salesman. So I go and I talk to their sales manager and say, I want to be a car salesman. The guy says, hey, let me tell you, you just made the best move you ever made in your life. Well, how's that? He says, we sell cars by the truckloads, literally. He said, you come to work for me, I will teach you how to sell cars and I'll make you rich selling cars. Boy, I'm motivated. I'm motivated. I don't know anything about selling cars. I'll send you to car selling school. We got the best car selling school in the business. I will teach you everything you need to know about selling cars. Cool, cool. So now I'm motivated and you're going to train me. What's my job here? Sell cars. If every moment you're on the clock, you're not involved in selling cars, then you're not doing what I hired you to do. So that is your role here. So you would think if I'm motivated to sell cars, I have the ability to sell cars, and I totally understand that's my job, then the results and behavior ought to be selling cars. I should be selling cars. Now, what could cause that not to happen? This is where the S comes in MARS. MARS, M-A-R-S. This is where the S comes in, situational factors. I am the world's premier car salesman, but everybody's broke. Nobody has the extra money. I'm not selling cars. Or I might be selling a few, but I'm not selling cars. Those are situational factors. Another situational factor, I bring an employee in. I put them through new hire orientation. When you're out working, this is what I want you to do. I want you to wear your hard hat. I want you to wear your safety glasses. I want you to bend at the knees, lift with the leg. All these things I want you to do. Job guy comes in, superintendent comes in to get him. He says, okay, he says, forget everything that guy just told you. I hired you from the chin down. Get your butt out there and go to work. Yeah, but he said he's not signing your paycheck. I am. So all at once the situational factors change. I'm motivated to work safely. I have the ability to work safely. I totally understand it's my job to work safely. But the guy that's my boss says, you're going to do it my way. You're going to do it my way. And I'm either going to do it his way or I'm going to go someplace else to go to work. So those are situational factors that step in. You can use this as a reverse engineering process. If I'm not getting the behavior and results that I'm wanting, have I adequately motivated my people and given them the ability and thoroughly explained what it is I want them to do? If I have, then what situational factors are shortcutting this process? I don't need to pick on the person. I need to go back and find out where the situational factors are that's derailing this. That's where I need to focus my efforts. So it's an improvement strategy. I ask this question a lot during training. when you're doing your job, how safe will you be? How safe will you be when you do your job? Generally, this is the answer I get. As safe as I need to be. As safe as I need to be. Now the thing of it is you can have 3 people doing the exact same job. Their perception of how safe they need to be and what they need to do might be totally different. Might be totally different. So as safe as I need to be, that can be somewhat problematic. Then you ask other folks. You ask a company executive, for example. You ask a job superintendent, is your project safe? Is your company safe? The answer I've gotten a lot is, I believe we are. I believe, do you run a safe company here? I believe we do. And a lot of times, yes, we run a safe company here. Good, good, I'm glad to hear that. What are you basing that off of? What are you basing the fact that you're a safe company off of? Well, nobody's getting hurt. Nobody's getting hurt. So that means that has to equate to we're a safe company. I'm not saying that's not true. I'm saying that could be somewhat misleading. Everybody that's listening to me right now, and I'd be willing to bet even by this early in the morning, there's probably something that you've done this morning that could have generated an unwanted event. It was probably a little more risky. You probably did something that was a little risky, but it didn't happen. Okay? Nobody got hurt. I didn't hurt myself. Okay? I wasn't safe. I just didn't hurt myself. I was lucky. There's a huge difference between a luck-driven safety program and a directing and desired outcome-driven safety program. And let me show where I'm coming from on this. Another gentleman, you'll know this saying, this is not mine. The absence of injury does not indicate the presence of safety. That just indicates the absence of injury, okay? What we don't want to do, a lot of our companies, they judge their safety performance off their OSHA incident rates and things like that, their accident rates, lost time rates, things like that. The problem with those is, I'm not saying they're not valuable indicators, but they're lagging indicators. They're telling you where you've been. Go to any company manager. How many OSHA recordable accidents did you have last year? They may be able to tell you. How many are you going to have this year? Well, I don't know. Well, and that's right, they don't. If they had 10 last year, that does not mean you're going to have 5 or 10 or 20 this year. One does not lead to the other. So if you're relying on lagging indicators, if you're judging your future performance off past performance, you know what they tell you in investment, don't do that. You're driving forwards looking backwards. And think about driving down the road at highway speed looking in your rearview mirror. You're driving 70 miles an hour down the interstate and you're looking in your rearview mirror. You're doing an excellent job of seeing what's behind you, but what you're not seeing is what's coming at you, because you're looking backwards, not forwards. However, this is an example of that. In 2022, now this is fictitious. I just made this up for demonstration purposes. Let's say I have a company in 2022, they had 3 OSHA recordable incidents. 2 of those incidents resulted in lost time. The company worked 750,000 man hours that year. My OSHA recordable incident rate, number of incidents, times 200,000 divided by your man hours comes out to be about 2.4. Now, if you wonder what that means if you truly had 100 people working 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, 2.4 of those people had an incident that couldn't be fixed with first aid. That's what 2.4 means. My lost time incident rate, my LWDR, my lost work days incident rate is a 0.53. Okay, so that's my OSHA recordable rate, that's my lost time rate. Now I move forward in a year, I had 2 OSHA recordable incidents, none of which were lost time, and interestingly enough, I worked the same 750,000 man hours. Now when I do my calculation, my OSHA recordable incident rate's a 0.53, that's a 78% drop in 1 year in my OSHA recordable incident rate. My lost time rate's 0. I didn't have any lost time accidents. So if I simply look at my numbers, I can say I had a 78% improvement in my OSHA recordable incident rate and 100% improvement in my lost time accident rate. And I can say that, and the numbers do. But the problem is, the 3 recordables in 2022 were back strains. The 2 recordables in 2023 were fatalities. There's no way 23 was a better year than 22, but the numbers show that it improved. So don't rely solely on those numbers. It's like if you ever watched The Wizard of Oz. Toward the end where Toto goes and pulls the curtain back and the wizard's back there running the machine. And he says, ignore the man behind the curtain. If we're just looking at the numbers and we're not looking at what's behind the numbers, we're ignoring the man behind the curtain. And you just can't do this. It'll lead you down the wrong path. All right. On leading indicators, this is one of my favorite leading indicators. You have it on the dash of your vehicle. It's a leading indicator. On one side it says E, on one side it says F. So if F means full, then E means either. Doesn't mean empty, it means either. Either put gas in or you're going to walk. Now when you see that needle heading toward the E, it's telling you, you better do something, you're going to be walking. You better do something, you're going to be walking. You better do something, you're going to be walking. It's a leading indicator. It's telling you where you're going. You're heading for a walking trip if you don't pay attention to this needle. It's a leading indicator. Okay? What good would it do to not have this gauge? All at once the vehicle runs out of fuel and a speaker, the smart speaker comes on and says, you're out of fuel. Well, no kidding. Okay? 5 minutes sooner on that information would have been a whole lot more helpful. All right, that's where leading indicators come in. So we want to focus on how can we have leading indicators, OSHA recordable incident rates, lost time rates, things like that. I'm not saying they have no value. It kind of positions us in national averages and things like that, and our customers look really heavily at it. You know this. We need to look at leading indicators. So I asked myself, so what does right look like? What does right look like? First thing, if I'm going to go down this road, I'm going to have to understand the difference between responsibility and accountability. Now, we can debate this all day long. Responsibility is what I'm responsible to do. If I go to my crew foreman and I say, listen, every morning before you start work, you need to have a daily job briefing. You need to get your crew together and you need to have a documented daily job briefing, a conversation about what you're going to do, what the hazards are, what the steps are, what the hazards are, what can get us and how we're going to keep it from getting us. Everybody needs to buy in and sign off on it. Sign off, maybe, maybe not, I don't care either way. That's what they're responsible to do. Accountability is when I go out to measure to see if they're doing it. If I tell somebody what I want them to do, but I don't ever check to see if they're doing it, I'm telling them what the responsibility is, but I'm not really holding them accountable. Now, accountability has some other terms too, but I like to use it as it says. It's my ability to count. If I have a measurement criteria in place, if I know what percentage of my people are doing this or doing this or doing this, that's a measurement tool. And if I've clearly defined what it is that I'm looking at, now I have the ability to count whether they're doing it or not. And if they are doing it, attaboy, and if they're not doing it, we need to talk. And if they're just not willing to do it, that's what I call it's time to make a business decision. You have to ask yourself, am I willing to keep paying this person to not do what I'm paying them to do? They know what they're supposed to do. I've given them the tools and resources to do what they want to do. They understand what I want them to do. They're just not going to do it. They're just refusing to do it. So that's business decision time. Does it benefit my business to keep that person, or to let them go help them find another job by taking this one from them? Now, you know as well as I do, you've been in management spots. There are times that, yes, if I could find a good replacement, that guy would be gone or that gal would be gone, but there's no viable replacement. You're scared to death of what you may get in return, so you put up with that because what you may get in return may be worse. Okay, I understand that those are business decisions we make, but we really got to look deep into this. Think about this. Safety expectations generally are framed in generalities. They believe, when we have these, we believe everybody understands what's expected. And one of the young ladies here I was talking to this morning, we had this conversation about common sense. You ought to have enough common sense to know if you did that, you were going to get hurt. Okay, fine. We can say that. The problem is they're hurt. Another thing in human performance is says blame fixes nothing. Blame fixes nothing. So I can go out all day long and say the reason that guy got hurt is he has no common sense. Well, that's not going to keep the next one from getting hurt. That does nothing for me. It's a useless waste of time. I'm not a real strong believer in common sense because I'm a safety guy, right? You ever know a safety guy with common sense? They don't exist, right? That's been out there forever. Those two don't go together. I'm not real convinced about common sense. I do believe there is a thing called common knowledge. Common knowledge, you and I, we can talk about any given subject. And if it's something you know well and I don't, within a very short period of time, you're going to realize we do not have a lot of common knowledge on this. But a lineman talks to a lineman, a roofer talks to a roofer, a mechanic talks to a mechanic. Within a very short period of time, they know they have some commonality, some common knowledge. That I like. The reason I don't like common sense, from a safety point of view, from a management point of view, I don't know if you got it. I don't know if you don't. I don't know if you've gained any or lost any as the day goes along. And I can't measure any of that. None of that's measurable. If it's not measurable, it's not manageable. I'm in the management business. As a safety guy, I'm in the safety management business. As a superintendent, as a company owner, you're in the production management business. You're in the quality we're in that management business. We have to manage those things. So for example, my safety expectation may be, before purchasing a firearm, always do a thorough visual inspection of the barrel. Now, anybody that knows anything at all about firearms should have enough common sense to know where I'm coming from here. That's the expectation. This could be the interpretation. And I'm going to look at that and say, come on, you don't have enough common sense not to know to look down that gun barrel? Well, if it happens to go south, looking at that person there with a hole through their head and saying, what, you didn't have enough common sense? What good does that do? What good does that do? Now, do I have to go in depth and say, don't look down the barrel of the gun? You got to look at your audience. You got to look at your audience. Now, this is a scenario, obviously. There are things out there that you would think anybody that looks at what we're getting ready to do would look at that and say, no, they ought to have enough common sense not to do that. But when you'll find out, the problem is when you find out they didn't have enough common sense, it's too late. It's after the event. Now you're in repair mode, recovery mode, crisis mode. I would much rather dedicate my efforts to keep it from happening than having to deal with the occurrence. All right, let's do this as an example instead of the OSHA recordable incident rates. In 2023, and I'm not saying I'm the seatbelt guru, I just picked this out. 2023, 75% of 1,000 workers I observed were wearing seatbelts in a company vehicle when they were supposed to be doing it. That means I'm at 75% compliance. In 2024, 98%. I put some initiatives into place to try to improve this. I went from 74 to 75% to 98%. Huge improvement. So I can say, well, I kind of feel that what I put in place worked. It is better because I had a 24% improvement, 23% improvement in behavior. If I had a 23% improvement in less at-risk behavior, then I have a 23% less chance is the key word here, of having a material unwanted event. I've tilted the scales in my favor. So if I've had a 23% improvement in seatbelt use, I should reward that. A lot of our companies have incentive programs, safety incentive programs. A lot of our companies have gone away from them because they said, well, they just became entitlement programs. You have to think about what it is you're incentivizing. If I'm incentivizing things like 0 accidents, OSHA recordable incident rates being where I want them to be, things like that, customer complaints being where I want them to be, I'm incentivizing lagging events. But if I know that I've had a 23% improvement in any safety-related behavior, I definitely need to incentivize that, because that's telling me I am not heading toward, or I'm less likely heading toward, that material unwanted event. I've tilted the scales in my favor. That's what we should reward people for, because behavior that is rewarded is repeated. Behavior that is rewarded is repeated. So look at what it is you want them to do. Now, I'm not saying everything, because I had this question, I was talking about this philosophy to a utility up in New England. And a guy that was there was really sharp. He said, so what you're saying is, he said, do I need a clear description on everything I want people to do for everything we do? And I said, no. I said, the book would be this high off the table. I said, it would be useless. I said, look at where your losses, I said, if you're wanting to improve your losses, look at where your losses are coming from. Look at where if you're having a bunch of lifting, rear end collision, whatever, wherever your losses are coming from, look at that and say, when they're doing this job, what does it look like when they do that job correctly? Characterize that. Then ask yourself, are they doing it that way? If the answer is no, you kind of understand why you're having the results that you're having, okay? You want your activities to drive your results. You don't want your results driving your activities. We see this happen all the time. We've had an incident. We had an incident on the job. One of the first things that happens, we'll have safety stand-downs. We'll have safety meetings. We'll have safety training. Everybody has to come in for 5 days of OSHA training. Okay, the last 5 days of OSHA training didn't prevent this from happening, but surely this next 5 days of OSHA training will. No, those are results driving our activities. It's proactive. It's reactive. It's backwards looking. It's not gonna. It's just you're constantly in crisis management. You're waiting for the next event so I can put something into place to try to fix it. I want my activities to drive my results. So if I go back to my OSHA incident rates, if my OSHA incident rates are dropping, I want to be able to point toward the reason I had a 20% drop in my OSHA incident rates is because I implemented this, and this, and these are the fruits of that effort. But if I can't tie my rising or lowering statistics to an activity, then it's just luck. It's just luck. Okay, we put initiatives into place. Let's say I want everybody to start wearing, red shirts on Wednesday. I believe if everybody starts wearing red shirts on Wednesday, we'll be a safer organization. Okay, so all at once, at the end of the year, my OSHA recordable incident rates are better. See, I told you, red shirts were the answer. Show me how red shirts lowered that. If you can't show me how red shirts lowered that, it's a fool's paradise. You're just misleading yourself, okay? So yeah, sometimes these initiatives don't make sense. You want to provide clear expectations regarding performance of critical tasks. The company, I'm retired from Quanta Services, and I'm gonna blow Quanta's horn here because I think they had the right idea. One of the things that they put in place, and I helped develop this a little, was what was called their sticky process, the capacity model. And sticky stands for stuff that kills you. It's not stuff, but since this is a generic, it's stuff that kills you. And the safety director there said, you know what? He says, we've been focusing on all these things to try to keep our OSHA numbers down. He said, and we are driving our OSHA numbers down. What we had is we had what was called an asymptotic curve. We were always heading towards 0, but we never got there. and we never were because it just wasn't in the system. He said, I'm tired of focusing on all these things to drive our OSHA numbers down. He said, I want to focus. He says, we tried to put a process into place where we wanted people to get rid of all their pocket knives and just use skinning knives and proper cutting tools. He said, yeah, it was a great idea. We can lower our OSHA incident rates because we have a lot of hand injuries. We can lower our OSHA incident rates. He said, but pocket knives aren't killing people out there on the job. He says, electrical contact, improper line cover, not grounding correctly, not setting machines up correctly, not wearing seat belts and rolling machines down banks and getting thrown out of the cab. He says, that's what's killing our people. That's what I want to focus on. He says, I might stop one fatality in a year and it'll be a blip on the radar screen of our OSHA recordable incident rate. It may or may not make a noticeable difference in the rate, but we had one less fatality this year. Okay, yeah, I had 5 people cut their fingers because they wouldn't use a pocket knife right. I'll work on that, but we had one less fatality this year. That's much better. That's much better. So why? Why do we need to provide clear expectations regarding performance of critical tasks? If it's definable, it's measurable. If it's measurable, it's manageable. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. It's that simple. If you cannot measure it, you can't manage it. So, when you go down this road, and this is not as easy as it looks, it's difficult, okay, but it's a doable. When you're developing expectations, state what you want, not what you don't want, okay? Also avoid words in your expectation that end in ly. I want you to work safely. I want you to drive safely. I want you to lift correctly, okay? What's that mean? If we haven't sat down and said, when I say I want you to lift safely, this is what that means. And anytime you hear me use the word lift safely, this is what I'm referring to, then you can't tell somebody lift safely and expect them to lift what's in your, because you've got a picture in your head that you're trying to see them put into performance. You've got to get that out of your head into words because they can't see in there, but they can hear words. And you get that into words that clearly describe that. So I want to avoid properly, quickly, correctly. They're subjective. They're subjective. Now, when it comes to getting people up to speed to do this, first of all, I have to develop my expectation. For example, how I went down this road, as I told you, we were having crane incidents. So we wanted to come up with a standard way of when a crane is set up for operation, this is what you should expect to see every time a crane is set up for operation. Okay, so now who do you think I had to involve to come up with that? Crane operators. High level of employee involvement. I got to get the crane operator to sit down with me. I know the OSHA stuff. I know the risk management stuff. I know all that. I've run a crane or two, but I'm not a crane operator. I want to get the guy that does this every day because there's nobody that knows the safest way to run that crane better than the person that's running it. They know it. They know how to do it, and they know when they're taking chances, and they know what they think they can get away with. So the first thing I want to do is I want to define what it is I want them to do. Then I want to train the person on that definition and expectation. So I define it to them, I train them on it, I give them the tools and resources to do what I'm asking them to do. Then I have to observe. So when I define and train, that's responsibility. When I observe, that's accountability. Now I'm going out and measuring their performance. Lastly, coach for improvement or recognition. Coaches don't always coach for improvement. If you watch any successful team of any sort, a good play is made on the field, the team comes off, great job, great job, great job. He's not telling them how to do anything. He's patting them on the back, he or she, y'all did a great job. That's coaching. That's coaching. That's elevating that person and saying, absolutely, you're doing what I wanted you to do. So one of the things that we all do, all of our crews do job briefings. If I ask somebody, Is it important that your people do good job briefings? I would most likely get the answer yes. Well, my next question is going to be is what's a good job briefing look like? How do you know it's a good one? Well, it's all filled out. I said, well, no, you're defining what a correctly filled out form looks like. I want to know what a good job briefing looks like because the form could be beautiful. They filled it out in the motel room the night before. They flopped it out on the hood of the truck. Everybody signed it. He threw it in the seat and he said, now that crap's over with. Let's actually talk. So what's written on the paper and the actual job briefing may not be the same thing. How do I know that's happening? If I'm not there the moment that happens, how do I know that they actually had a good job briefing? Well, what I need to do is I need to come up with some expectations on what, now, first of all, this does not define categorically a good job briefing. This is examples of things I look for. There are others, but these are things I look for. The first thing, I want to walk up to any employee out there and say, what's your current work address? I want them to be able to tell me that because that should have been covered on the job briefing. Now they say, I can't remember, but hold on. And they go get it and say, we're right here. I'm kind of okay with that. They may not have instant recall of their work address, but they know where to go get it. Why is that important? In case they got to call an ambulance. In case they got to call emergency help. So every employee, I'm not going to get them together. Hey guys, what's your current work address? And one of them speaks and the other one, no. I'm going to go to them individually. So if I've got 5 people on a crew, that's 5 chances for an observation. 4 of them said, yep, I'm at da-da-da-da-da. One of them said no. That means 4 out of 5. 75% of the people on this crew know their current work location, 25% don't. I go to my foreman. I say, hey boss, you got a person out there who doesn't know their current work location. We need to work on that. I know you covered it on your job briefing and stuff, but we need to work on that. However, 75% of your people did know. Great job. And I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave with I'm going to tell them what I'd like to see them improve on, and then I'm going to leave with what they did really well. Because the last thing they hear from me is an attaboy. Because I don't care how screwed up it looks. You go out there and it could be a mess. There's got to be some things going right. Got to be. So let's address the things that need improved, and let's not forget to attaboy them for the things it's doing right, and do that second. Employee can state the location of the nearest emergency facility. If you got to go to where's the closest hospital from here? Hang on a second. He goes, here's the address. What are y'all doing? And they can tell me what they're doing. Now, if it's line work, what's the voltage? Well, I don't know. Well, if they don't know the voltage, what else don't they know? Minimum approach distance. What's the voltage? That should have been discussed in the job briefing. What's the minimum approach distance for that voltage? Now, what is your role in this job you're all doing out here? I know what the job is. What's your role? And they explain that to me. If they can explain these things to me, then I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I got 6 possible observations here. If I've got 5 people on the crew, that's 30 observations possibly I could make on one crew just simply on job briefings. If I do that over a year, think about the database I've got. So at the end of the year, I've made 10,000 job briefing observations, and only 50% of the time employees can state their current work location. If that's something that is of value to me, that's telling me I need to put something in place to see this get better. So I put an initiative in place, I put it out there, I run it. 6 months later, I'm still at 50%. It didn't improve. Here's the problem. The initiative wasn't designed to get you that improvement. It's not the people, it's the tool you tried to put in place. It wasn't the right tool. So rebuild the tool. Try a different initiative. If what you tried didn't work, try something different. Try something different. It's that simple. We all have lifting issues. All of us have lifting issues. We tell people, I want you to lift safely. Well, what does that mean? Generally it means don't get hurt when you're lifting. Okay. That doesn't mean I'm lifting safely. That just means I didn't get hurt. However, if I say, keep the load close, the employee keeps the load close to their body. They bend at the knees. They lift with their legs. They avoid twisting when placing a load. All those things are designed to keep that lifting injury from happening. All these things are measurable. They're measurable. So if I go out and I look for, let's just 6 months to a year, I don't care how long you run it, I run it for 6 months to a year. I find out after 6 months to a year of observations, only 25% of the time do my people avoid twisting when they're placing loads. Anybody at all should be able to realize, well, if 75% of the time my people are twisting when they're placing loads, where am I heading? I'm heading to a back injury claim. I'm heading to a back injury. 75% of the time they're doing this, they're going to wear themselves out and somebody's going to get hurt. Now, I have two choices. I can either start putting money away to start pay for the claim when it happens, because it's going to happen, or I can put an initiative into place to try to prevent that from happening. I can either be reactive and let the results drive my activity, or I can be proactive and let my activity drive my results. So if I put something in place, I start really coaching and hammering and driving on twisting to place loads, and I see that the evidence of that happening drop, I just increased safety in my organization because I lowered the chance of having a loss. I mean, that's the way it works. On driving, I had a guy on a meeting one time. Said, man, we're having a lot of driving incidents. Does anybody have any ideas on how I can help lower my driving incidents? I said, do you ride with your drivers? Do you do driver observations? And he said, dude, are you kidding? I said, what? He said, I don't have time to go out and ride with my drivers. I said, you know why you're having driving incidents now? You don't have time to go out and make sure that the people that are running up and down the road in $100,000 or greater vehicles of yours are driving the way you want them to drive. You don't have time to go out and observe that. The system is perfectly designed to give them the results that they're getting. So if I say, driver maintains vehicle speed at no greater than 9 miles an hour above the posted speed limit. 9 is an arbitrary number. And that comes from, you've all heard it, 9 you're fine, 10 you're mine. Okay? How fast now, I know I got safety guys that's listening to this. And I know I got safety guys that have safety rules that say you will follow the speed limit when you're in a company vehicle. And I know I got safety guys driving safety vehicles for the company that exceed the speed limit in that company vehicle every day. They set their cruise control for at least 5 or 6 above the speed limit, because that's what everybody else is doing. It's safer. Believe it or not, your safety rules can sometimes put you at risk. If I have a safety rule that says you will drive the speed limit or I will fire you, you will not work here. If you go to 285 in Atlanta and try to drive the speed limit, you're going to get killed, pulled over, or kill somebody else. Everybody else, 285 is not the road number, that's the speed limit. That's what everybody's running. They're all running 285. So if you're out there running 65 and they're whipping by you, you're getting ready to cause a problem. Go with the flow of traffic. So if my safety rule said, driver maintains vehicle speed at no more than 5 miles an hour above the posted speed limit, or goes with the flow of traffic whichever is safer, I can hop in the vehicle, I can observe them, I can look at the speedometer, and every time I look at the speedometer, it's either a yes or a no. At the end of the trip, I can say, well, I observed your speed 100 times, 9 out of 10, 90 out of 100, you did it. 90% of the time, you've fallen the speed limit. How can I help you get to the 95%? How can I help you get to 98%? Or 98% 95% might be as good as you can get. The environment may only support 95% because of all the other peculiarities in it. Driver maintains 3 to 5 second following distance from vehicle in front. Driver signals at least 3 times before changing lanes. Blink, 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 move over, blink, 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 move back. Driver checks mirrors every 5 to 10 seconds. These are just things I randomly picked out. These are all observable. And notice what you'll see here is all these are, you tell them what you want them to do. I could say, driver does not tailgate. Well, that's telling them what I don't want them to do. What I want them to do is maintain a 3 to 5 second following distance for a pickup truck. Now, if it's a semi-truck, bucket truck, digger derrick, it might be a 5 to 10 second. Remember, your processes have to be flexible. So I might have a different little observation process for large equipment. Driver ensures all occupants are wearing seat belts. If I'm riding in a vehicle with a driver, I can observe all these things, every one of them. And at the end of the trip, I can give the driver immediate feedback on what they need to improve on and what they did really well. And then when I come back, whenever the time period is, maybe a month later, for next month's driver observation, hey, remember last month we struggled a little bit with the 3 to 5 second? Let's see if we get better this month. And the very fact, there's a thing called the Hawthorne effect. And the Hawthorne effect, in essence, describes behavior will change when it's being observed. So yeah, the very fact that I'm going to hop in a vehicle and ride with them, they know I observe them, they're going to drive better. Okay, and I've had people tell me, well, all they're going to do is they're just going to do what you want them to do while you're riding with them. When you hop out of the vehicle, they're just going to go back to their own ways. I have no control over my environment. I have control on how I respond to my environment. What that driver does when I hop out of the vehicle, I'm hoping they don't. When I'm in the vehicle, I have some control over that. How they drive when I get out of the vehicle, I have no. So what I'm going to focus on is how they're driving with them. I'm going to have this conversation. These are the things I want you to do when you're driving. Can you do all these things? Yeah. Have you a problem with any of these things? No. Well, let's go drive. Let's go drive. Okay. These are the things you did really well. Congratulations. And so these are the things we need to work on. You boost those victories. Now, this can get controversial, and this is by no means rote. I've asked linemen for years, what's proper line cover? And almost always the answer you get, it depends. It depends. And it does. It depends on the job you're doing. But can't we have kind of a medium or a baseline standard that says all exposed energized parts with an extended reach plus 3 feet of the line mechanic's workspace, except the thing they're working on, they're covered with insulating line material. Now, where does the 3 feet come from? We've all heard of the 5-foot rule. All right, your arm's about 3 feet long. Minimum approach distance on distribution runs about 2.5 foot. Okay, so if you're looking at this extended reach plus 3 feet, you're talking about 6 feet. If everything you could contact that would hurt you within 6 feet of your work area, except the part you're working on, is covered, there's a real good chance you're not going to make contact with any of that stuff because it's covered. Now, the flexibility part comes in. Well, this is old, wore-out copper. This stuff's been up there for 1,000,000 years, and I'm afraid if I put that much line cover on it, it'll fall to the ground. I get it. I'm not saying follow the rule and put yourself unnecessarily at risk. If you can't follow this rule, stop. Let's come up with plan B. Let's just don't jump into it. Let's stop and think about, because we can't do the ideal thing, what's the next best, safest thing we can do? Let's get together and have that plan and then execute that. It's basically called controls. Anytime you get ready to tackle anything serious, I've heard you ought to have at least 2 to 3 controls in place to keep this thing from getting you or affecting you. When your amount of controls drop, you really got to start paying attention. When you're one control away from a disaster, you need to really be thinking, do we really need to do this? Does this need to happen right now, right with this? I mean, does it have to happen? If it does, it does. If it does, it does. But if it doesn't, you realize I'm one control away from, boy, if this goes south, I got no backup. That's a bad spot to be in, and we're in those spots a lot. But at least it gives you that count to 10 moment to think about it. Now let's talk about another really controversial issue, And by no means do I want to set the standard. If I'm going out and I'm observing grounding and bonding being done, one of the things that I want to see is I want to see all grounding cables are installed using a live line tool. None of this stuff's put on by hand, even though OSHA in their latest revision allowed that to certain, if there's already a ground on and you can see it, they allow you to put another one on by hand. I ain't crazy about that. That's just, to me, that's instilling bad habits. I know we can do it, I know it, but it's instilling bad habits. Grounds are placed as close as practical to the work location. So we would have to have some conversation about this, me and the line mechanics that come up with this. They say, what do you mean as close as practical? The job you're getting ready to do, your grounds are only as far away as they need to be for you to do that job. Yeah, you could put them 7 spans away, but they could be a span away. I got to have them, they can't be any closer than a span, but I can have them, all right, then that's as close as practical to do your job. De-energized work is performed in a zone absent of hazardous differences in electrical potential. Now, first of all, there's a huge difference, and we've had this conversation over the years, there's a huge difference between dead and de-energized. Those two terms are not synonymous. De-energized means it's removed from normal sources of potential and it's grounded. You cannot consider something de-energized, in my opinion. You can't consider it de-energized unless it has a visible ground on it. Okay, so it's removed from its normal sources of potential and grounded. Dead means it's absent. There is no potential. Zero. You know as well as I do, we have grounded lines. You take a voltage reading, you ground it, take a voltage reading, and there's still voltage on the line after you ground it. I've seen 500 lines grounded and still read 8,000 volts. Grounded correctly to the tower and still read 8,000 volts. You got to remember Ohm's law, IER. Okay, anytime you have resistance, you're never going to drop the voltage to zero. Because you've got resistance, you're going to have an opposition to current flow, and if you have an opposition to current flow, voltage will be a little higher. So because in every grounding system, there's always resistance in a grounding system, there's always going to be some voltage present. We've always been taught if it's grounded, it's dead. Wrong. If it's grounded, it's de-energized. Dead means there's no voltage. We have people killed, sadly, every year on grounded, de-energized lines, and they're electrocuted. The line wasn't dead, it was de-energized. All grounds are removed using a live line tool, and grounds are sized according to the maximum available fault current. These are things I look for. Not all encompassing, not all of them, but this is just a sample of some of the things that I would look for. Because if my grounds aren't big enough, I know where I'm heading. Sooner or later, I'm going to have an accidental restrike or an accidental energization, or a line's going to fall. Something's going to cause that line to come hot, and the grounds aren't going to last because they weren't big enough, because I didn't understand the fault current. Or if I put them on by hand and I make a mistake, people make mistakes. I'm going to put the grounds on by hand. I've done it a million times. This time I made a mistake. There was something I didn't see, and it gets me. Okay? Don't do that. Just don't do those kind of things. You can shorten this to say, work is performed in a zone absent of hazardous difference in electrical potential. Anybody that knows electrical work knows what I'm talking about here. Now, what is a hazardous potential? According to OSHA, anything above 50 volts. 50 volts or more. So if you can look at it and you see, you know what? That person could bridge a 100-volt gap there with their body. They're putting themselves in that. They should not, by law, they're not allowed to do that. They're putting themselves unnecessarily at risk, and doing that will generate a loss, most likely generate a fatality. Okay? So when you shorten to that, and so if you see this, work is performed in a zone absent of hazardous differences in potential. If your answer is no, that ought to be an immediate stop. Stop work. You are not working in a zone free of hazardous differences in potential. Stop now. Come here, Let's talk about this. One, why aren't we? And two, what do we need to be able to do to meet this? Because if we can't meet this, we can't do this as de-energized. We're going to have to do it as an energized job. Even though it's cut off, we're going to have to do this as an energized job because we can't meet this standard. Here are the keys. Here are the keys, wrapping this thing up. Clearly define what safe looks like, or what productive looks like, or what quality looks like. It's all the same. It's a universal tool. Match and train workers to the expectation. Develop measurement tools, accountability tools. Own the process and results. Now let me back up to this one first. When I first started this was taught to me by Liberty Mutual Insurance Company. A guy from Liberty Mutual showed me this process, and then I took it and ran with it from there. Back in the day, it was all paper. You had all these observations on paper sheets, and you would go out and look, and you would mark yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And then you would add it up at the end of the day. Now they've got it where it's electronic. You can do it on cell phone. You can do it right there on your cell phone, plug it all in, and at the end of the conversation, you can say you did this 90% of the time, this 80% of the time, right there. Real-time feedback, and it's even dynamic enough that you can take pictures and then send your observation to their superintendent or to their supervisor. I was just out of the job and saw some really fantastic stuff. This is what I saw. And so it's immediate feedback to the person on the job. Y'all did a great job. And then boom, you just sent their boss a picture of everything they're doing great. Now, some folks don't want that, but some do. Some do. They want to be recognized for doing right because they're proud of what they do. You have to own the process and the results. Coach for improved performance and incentivize victories. Incentivize victories. I've asked the question. My current seatbelt use at my company is 50%. I want, in 1 year, I want my seatbelt use to be 98%. So I'm going to put some initiatives into place to go from 70% or whatever the number was to 90%. At the end of the year, I'm at 89%. I've asked people, should we celebrate? Nope, you didn't hit your goal. Oh, you went from 70% to 89%, and you're not going to celebrate because you missed it by 1. You're going to not celebrate that percentage of improvement because you missed it by 1. That's wrong. If I went from 70% to 89%, if I had a 19% increase in performance, even though I wanted 20, if I had a 19% increase in performance, it's party time. Because if it's party time, that might put me over the edge. You get that other 1%. And also what I have to realize is the tool I have trying to get me to 90% or 98%, it might be the tool's problem. The best I can get is 90% because that's all the tool will generate. I got to do something different, okay? So we tend to go back, well, it's the people. They're just not willing to get on board. No, it's the system. You got to work on the system. All right, that closes it out. My name's James McGowan, Associate Consultant. These are the guys I'm working with now. There's my contact information. Feel free to call me, email me. I'll back up in case you need to see it again. retiredcsp@gmail.com. Okay, I love that. I was glad I got that email.